Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to bring up Congresswoman Lofgren's H.R. 724, which would rescind President Trump's refugee ban on individuals like the 30-year-old Iranian citizen who entered the U.S. to visit his family in San Francisco, then was detained and transferred to county jail.
That individuals like Hamid Khalid Darwish, who helped the U.S. military in Iraq, got a special immigrant visa, won't be detained at JFK Airport for 19 hours.
Which would rescind the President's ban for the sake of our national security.
So that green card holders like Bissar Youssef, a refugee from Iraq on his way home after getting engaged in Kurdistan, won't get detained in LAX. I yield back.
President Trump rescind his refugee ban on children like the 12-year-old Yemeni girl, Iman Ali, who was not allowed to board a plane to join her U.S. parents, leaving her in limbo.
Like Yazidi refugee from Iraq, life is in danger because of her husband's work with Americans and who was refused boarding on a flight to the U.S. out of Erbil.
On Yazidi women from Iraq, like Nada, who was not allowed to board a flight and remained separated from her husband, a former interpreter for the U.S. Army. I yield back.
Can the chair... Individuals like the Dr. Suha Abu Shama, a Sudanese doctor at the prestigious Cleveland Clinic, who was denied entry, forced to leave the country, and therefore deprived the country of his medical services.
Like Mustafa, who worked on construction crew on American bases to fortify them and tortured because of it. So that family members like Wazin Al-Hawi, a 69-year-old Iraqi national, will not be refused boarding on a flight to visit his U.S. citizen family in the United States.
Would rescind President Trump's refugee ban on former Iraqi translators for the United States, like Faroud Sharif, who was cleared to settle in Nashville, Tennessee, along with his family, but stopped before he could board his flight and sent back to harm's way in Iraq.
Yesterday's headline in the Washington Post: these Muslim families sought refuge in America's heartland. Now Trump's visa ban is tearing them apart. One is in my district.
So that students like Miriam can return to classes at the University of Chicago, and other students can continue their studies at U.S. colleges.
And like 16-year-old Afghani boy Sardar Hussein, who lost his family in a car bomb and now hopes after nearly 2 years of ordeal to get on his flight to America.
Like Sarah, an Afghani television presenter who fled amidst death threats, had waited for years to be resettled in the U.S., only to have her hopes dashed.
Which would rescind President Trump's refugee ban on children, like a 5-year-old that came to Dulles Airport with another family. Her mother was waiting for her, and for 4 hours she was not allowed to see her mother. That's not good policy. It's not good for the safety of our troops. It's not good for safety of America. Let's pass H.R. 724.
Sahar Aghnimi, who came here to care for her elderly mother, who had just undergone surgery, only to be detained at O'Hare Airport and ultimately returned to Abu Dhabi.
Would rescind President Trump's refugee ban on families like that of Ghassan Asali, which was en route to Pennsylvania from Syria on approved visas, then turned away and flown back to Qatar.
Having been at JFK Airport this weekend, I stand in support of military soldiers who risked their lives and whose family members were unlawfully detained and questioned, even after their service to our country. This is un-American.
Women like Fatin Diab, a Syrian refugee and former charity worker whose family had applied for resettlement to the United States, but will now not be able to.
Prevented South Carolina resident and data scientist Nazanin Zanuri from returning to the United States after visiting her mother in Iran.
On individuals like the student from Afghanistan who was denied entry, sent back, and had her visa canceled.
69-year-old Armenoui Badalian and 77-year-old Hamayek Shamarian are Christian refugees from Iran and have applied for resettlement in the U.S.
In light of individuals like Jordanian Musa Shakara, a cardiology fellow in Connecticut whose wife is a Syrian doctor and whose family cannot visit because of the ban.
And stop the separation of families like that of the Iranian professional whose wife is trapped in Iran and who is considering leaving the United States because of it.
like Amir Ajab Bakari, a computational statistical physicist from Iran who was just offered an assistant professor job at Yale University.
Women like the 77-year-old held at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, and she tried to see her son and his family for the first time in years.
Like the 69-year-old who was scheduled to visit the U.S. this past weekend to meet her new grandson, but is now in limbo.
On families like the Syrian refugee family of 6 who were scheduled to arrive in Cleveland on Tuesday or January 31st, but are now blocked indefinitely.
And help unify the family of Farah Yusa, a refugee who risked her life for the United States forces in Iraq and whose father, mother, and sister are now barred from entering the United States of America.
Which would rescind the President's refugee ban that impacts green card holders, like the woman located in Iran with her 3-year-old U.S. citizen daughter.
Repeal Trump's overreaching executive order that purports to make America safer. It's time to restore American values. What are the Republicans afraid of? If you support his action, bring up the bill and vote against it. If you don't support his action, we're giving you an opportunity to restore the lawful rights of Congress.
The gentleman's time is expired.
People. Because our nation has always welcomed refugees and the poor and those who are in need. I don't know why we don't bring up H.R. 724, which will rescind President Trump's refugee ban on students like the Iranian-born anthropology student who left the U.S. to carry out research and is now likely to be unable to return to defend this thesis or his thesis. If you believe in this ban, if you do not believe in the ban, bring it up so we can vote against this ban. I yield back.
This is what a refugee looks like, and I ask for unanimous consent to bring up H.R. 724, which would rescind President Trump's refugee ban and help unify the family of an Iraqi refugee who is now separated indefinitely from her husband and children because of the ban.
Rescind President Trump's appalling and discriminatory refugee ban on women like Samira Askari, a scientist from Iran who was set to begin a project to study tuberculosis at Harvard Medical School and was stopped from boarding her flight to the United States. Let us have a vote. Let us have a little democracy in the People's House.
Syrian skin cancer researcher living in Germany whose visa to visit colleagues in Philadelphia has now been revoked. Let us vote.
On individuals like the young scientist in Iran who was awarded a fellowship to study medicine at Harvard, but whose visa has now been indefinitely suspended.
So that the San Fernando Valley's own Darius Hicks, an American citizen, can be reunited with his wife, who's a humanitarian worker working with Afghan war victims in Iran. She has been denied even the chance to schedule a visa interview at our embassy in Abu Dhabi.
That led to a Stanford University graduate student who has lived in the United States since 1993, getting handcuffed and then detained at JFK Airport for 5 hours.
Send President Trump's cold and callous refugee ban on travelers like the UK resident who holds an Iranian passport, was due to fly back to Glasgow via New York and had her transit visa revoked.
And help unify the family of Mukhtar and his wife, who spent 20 years in a refugee camp after fleeing Somalia and will continue to be separated from their children who still live in the camp.
Quran Chauhan, who arrived in the U.S. 5 years ago and is going through the naturalization process, but is separated from her sister and 2 children who are set to arrive in mid-February.
Scheduled to arrive today in Toledo from war-torn Iraq was a fully vetted mother and her 3 young daughters, one of whom is less than a year old. They're forced to remain in Tunisia with their futures very uncertain. I yield back.
President Trump's tragic refugee ban that would have barred women like the Syrian violinist who has performed at the White House and who's worried about her family that remain in Aleppo.
Keeps apart families like that of Luca Freschi, who had planned to move to Harvard Medical School in March, but whose Iranian wife would not be able to join him.
Like Shadi Hadarifar, a philosophy student at the University of Tehran who was accepted to New York University but is now unsure if she will be able to attend.